Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Change on the Run podcast, where we discuss common change challenges and ways you can address them when you're short of time. And I'm your host, Phil Buckley. Today's topic is responding to criticism. It makes sense that people have different views on what needs to be done and how to do it on major change initiatives. Project plans and responses to challenges are built on assumptions and incomplete knowledge. So different perspectives are natural and beneficial. So planning is really the first step to make sure that you address criticism in the best way. So how do you respond to criticism in ways that support your positions and preserves relationships needed to be successful? And my guest today is Roberta Assaf. Roberta, welcome to the show.
Hello, Phil. Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being on. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Yeah, me too.
Roberta is the HR and change management consultant with private and public experience, including telecommunications, metal and mining, transportation, and retail industries, and federal aviation and municipal services agencies. She's currently completing her MBA and Masters of Management and Team Management degrees at the European Business School of Barcelona. Roberta, what's your experience been with getting and receiving criticism?
Criticism, I feel like everyone experiences it one way or another, and it's so present in our everyday. For me personally, I could look back to my early stages of just launching my career, and I was supporting a really great leader. And right off the bat, I was getting into projects that I really didn't have much experience in. I didn't really have much knowledge in at all. So naturally, when, I come to deliver whatever I was supporting on, I got criticism. Some was positive, some was really constructive and negative, quite honestly. But naturally, it was a process where I was receiving feedback that wasn't always encouraging. Nevertheless, I felt that my leader had graciously delivered this feedback, and I recognize that's not always the case, where I've had times where leaders didn't necessarily have good wills or good intentions, or you could sense the animosity in the background or in their tone. But thankfully, this leader specifically had, graciously communicated criticism, but it doesn't necessarily change how you feel, right, when you receive criticism. So I felt really vulnerable. I felt exposed. I felt like I was trying to find my place in the organization as well, and trying to show your value. So it was right off the bat one of our first interactions where I needed to digest and respond to criticism.
And you speak about vulnerability and those emotions that come up, which I think we all feel. What impact did those emotions have on you? So you're getting it, maybe you're sensing it's not completely coming from a great place. How does that affect your performance and how you respond to what you're being told?
It's a great question. It's hard to digest because you can't really control people's agendas or people's intentions, and whether they're good-willed or not, or if they're trying to support you or sabotage you. And I'd like to think that the majority of people don't. So that's kind of where I would start. Is typically people have good intentions, and if I typically have a good relationship, or I intend to have a good relationship, I'm going to try to digest it in a way that helps me not take things personally, which is hard because I'm human, but then also translate it in a way where I could align it with my overall purpose. Who do I want to be? Is this feedback or is this criticism going to help me become closer to who I want to be and what I want to do? And sometimes it may not be aligned with who I want to be and what I want to do. So the vulnerability aspect to me is hard because you're trying to be removed enough where you could think objectively, but in the same sense, you also want to digest the information so you could really use it to transform, to create, to make your vision statement or your mission statement or your overall purpose.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned about, sort of you have your purpose and is this going to help or not? And sort of assessing whether the individual has good intentions or not, and typically they do. You've been on a lot of change initiatives and assignments. Does the culture of that particular project team sort of influence how you view the intent behind the criticism?
Typically, the projects have been really fast paced, really tight deadlines, and we're constantly needing to deliver something. Because we have tight deadlines, it's important to get feedback almost at every step of the way. So, for me, what's been really helpful is just get into a mindset where criticism is just natural, it's just part of work, and everyone experiences it, and it doesn't necessarily need to be negative, even if they may want to perceive it negatively. I need to try to put it in a mind frame where it's just part of the work, and for me to get good work and good results, I need external feedback. It's been critical because at the end of the day, I need to deliver things that are on time, of quality, and needs approval. So it's been a critical aspect of just delivering change projects on time and with quality.
And yeah, it's the fast-paced nature of change. I think it's a common theme in all topics around change, that part of that environment is the speed of getting things approved and moving it forward and getting things done. And I'm just wondering, given that environment, is there a way to optimize that feedback that you get? It's going to happen. You almost have to receive it to see if you can get it approved and move it out. Any thoughts on that?
I've tried to take it at a place where it doesn't need to be so formal all the time, because for me, initially, that was where fear took a stronghold. So I tried to translate it into like mini pieces of feedback and of criticism in environments that is less intimidating. Right off the bat with projects, I would try to build a good relationship, an honest relationship with my leader or the lead or whoever, whichever teammates I'm working with. And right off the bat, just say, given these timelines, I'm open to feedback, right? Just setting up the tone, saying, I want to deliver good work. We want to work together as a team. We need to all be together in sync. And one way to ensure that we are is by communicating. And one form of communication is through feedback and criticism. So setting the tone right from the very beginning and having touch points has been one way for me to make it a little less formal, which has removed the barriers and fears of feeling the weight of the laundry list of 10 things that have gone wrong, right? So if I could digest them in smaller pieces, I could pivot quicker and less feel the weight of the criticism, in a sense.
I think it's fascinating about you asking for feedback up front. And I found that successful too. Almost like if you ask for it and then you get it, there's less of an emotional connection because you asked for it anyway and then you're getting it. How about suggesting that you give feedback to, say, some of the project leads or the person you report to or whomever? Have you made it a two-way street? One is, hey, please give me feedback. It's going to make me better. Do you mind if I give you feedback so that we can both be successful?
Yeah, it's been a learning experience for me as I jump into different projects with different teammates and different leads. So as part of the initial conversation with the team members, I do intentionally try to have that conversation and say, what works best for you? How do you learn? What are your goals in this project, right? Like personally and professionally. And that's where really I get the sense of, how open someone is to feedback and, if really it's my place to share that feedback or not. And most of the times people have been incredible. So I would always try to share 3 things that have worked really well and things that I've appreciated in that exchange. And if there's one thing that maybe we could have done better or that maybe would have helped me better. So I feel like most of the people that I've worked with have been really open in terms of leads or, in terms of people that I've reported into. But it's something that is continuously having courage to do and recognizing that criticism is just part of getting the job done right with in the right way. I'm still learning that, but I feel like it's really helped build that credibility and even the playing field a little bit too.
Do you have any examples of, say, the three things that, hey, I thought this worked really well, and perhaps a recent assignment, and hey, this is something I thought that we could have done better on? Anything come to mind?
One thing that recently, my recent project, one thing that really worked with my lead is we kind of had different times where we performed our best. She was an excellent leader and she woke up really, really early, and it was just kind of how her day had to be structured based off of her family and her kids and her quiet time. So naturally, I'm more of a night owl, and my peak performance is usually at times where people should be sleeping, like myself. So one thing that worked really well, and this was not intentional, it's just how it ended up being, was that our communication would hand off quite well. And that was something I ended up sharing. At first, I was afraid of it because, you would wake up and you would have a list of like 20 emails that are new, and you're like, oh my God, these are new things. I cleared everything out like 5 hours ago. But that was one thing that I needed to share, or she shared, saying, I'm sorry, I hope that this doesn't freak you out. And I needed to say, actually, no, it's quite helpful because I feel like we have a good handoff in communication. So that was one thing that she actually thought that she wasn't doing very well. So I needed to say, actually, no, it's actually working out very well. And given our timelines, let's just keep rolling with it. So that was one. There were a couple of things within that topic that I was able to share. One thing that was hard to share was when we were dealing with tight deadlines, of course, and we had different people. There was just different messages going out. So this was specifically around quality control of specific documents, and we were delivering many documents. So, and they all needed to be standardized, and we had different team members that we just weren't aligned on what was standard. So needing to like recognize where the gaps were and have that conversation and saying, okay, like how do we better communicate to the rest of the team so we make sure we're aligned and that we don't throw anyone under the bus, because we had like our names tied to each of the documents. So it would be evident if someone wasn't aligned or wasn't consistent with the rest. So we didn't want to throw anyone under the bus, but needing to be able to say, okay, like this is not working right now. We're 5 hours before deadline and we just need to stop, slow down to kind of speed up.
Sounds like you had a really good rapport with
Yeah.
that person to make it work and going forward. There's something that you mentioned also that, as you're ongoing, it's good to have feedback constantly. And I remember in my past, I once had some really valuable feedback that came at the end of a 1.5 year assignment. And it's like, oh my goodness, that would have been so helpful earlier on. Anything like that that's happened to you that, hey, it would have been great to know earlier, but now there's nothing I can do because we're closing down the project?
Yeah, I think, again, earlier on in my career, where I just felt like people were constantly watching, feeling like you're under the weight of, I don't know, the world, it seemed at that sense. And that feedback actually wasn't positive, it was negative. And it was hard for me to hear, like 1 year later, because it would have been such an easy fix. And it was something that I didn't even realize or know was a thing. So it was hard to digest because, there are just consequences to positive and negative feedback. And I thought to myself, I would have been so open if you would have just told me this a while ago, or at the beginning, or when we had our developmental conversations, and then that made me think, okay, how can I be open to these conversations, and how could I initiate them if they're not sharing all the information, or whether they intend or not? Like, how can I probe for more information to get that feedback that I need to, to reassure myself that I'm doing everything I can to be on track, but I'm also meeting expectations, or if I need to, readjust expectations or further understand expectations. So yeah, it was a hard one to digest because I didn't feel like I was in the wrong at that point. Like I felt like, according to your book, I was collecting all the data, understanding the facts, and I felt like it was wrongfully shared. And it was hard not to take personal, but again, needing to understand, okay, how do I step away from that? Even though you almost feel heartbroken, because you feel like you give your best and you want to be your best. And a whole year later, you receive this feedback and you thought, wow, that would have been such an easy fix, right? If that's what you had perceived or understood, or if only you knew the other side, right? So taking it on to myself to ask the questions, even when it's, terrifying, but most people are open to it. And it's just kind of what I needed to do to normalize criticism.
Takes a lot of courage. So good for you. It's very hard to do, and a lot of people don't do it. And I think in my past, I haven't done it in certain circumstances, and it would have been a lot better if I had. Have you ever had a circumstance where there's one person giving you criticism and it doesn't seem like the intent is positive, and they keep going? So, every meeting or every opportunity, it won't work. I'm concerned about the work you're doing, but it's a pattern that's really clear, probably not only to you, but to everyone else. Have you ever experienced that at all?
Unfortunately, I have. And again, it was an environment where you needed to make, actually in volleyball, I referee volleyball, and every decision you need to make very quickly. So it's like speed and accuracy that are critical in the refereeing environment. And we were under evaluation literally for like a 3-year program recently for me. And I just felt like the criticism was really personal, like year after year after year, where based off of my peers, like I was getting almost the opposite feedback. And from different mentors, I was getting really great feedback, in fact, but it was this one individual that I felt was kind of out to get me in a sense.
Yes.
And it was really hard to take, Phil. But again, it was one of those things. Actually, there's a quote that I really appreciate from Aristotle, is the only way to avoid criticism is to do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing. And for me, that just reminds me that whatever I do, like I can't please everyone, right? And if truly I look internally, I gather all the facts, I take an honest assessment of, my performance or where I stand or whatever the feedback was given, and I digest it in a way that doesn't really align with who I know I am and where I want to be, then it's just a kind thank you and just kind of a move on, like a gentle move on, right? But it's hard to avoid. Because in this case, this individual just kept like intentionally coming back and saying, no, you're you don't deserve this next spot, or you're not good enough for this. And it's like, okay, and it wasn't like why or how or what you could do better. So that's where I was able to understand that, I'm going to ask those harder questions with people that I trust and that are going to be honest with me. And at this point, like, I don't really need to keep engaging with someone that has been really hard and really negative, really hard.
I can imagine. And I was going to ask you a sports related question because, you're a regional official of Volleyball Canada at a very, very high level. And I thought it's a fascinating sort of complement of the work that you do in a profession and the work you do in sports. And I can imagine as an official, you're making calls that aren't popular with one team or the other. And there's sort of, I'm sure, immediate feedback you get on the call that you make.
Yeah.
How do you not take that personally when it could actually sway who wins and who doesn't?
Oh, honestly, there is no way that you don't take it personally. Like, I will tell you, it was a final championship at McMaster. It was the game winning point, and it was anyways, and it landed on my line, and I had to make that call. And you're like in the zone, you don't really think of anything. You don't really think about teams and who. Of course, you have to think about who it's going to impact or not, but you're just doing your job and you're recognizing like what call needs to be made, and you just make it naturally because that's kind of what I've been trying to do. And it was against the home winning team.
Oh,
And Phil, the whole crowd, like literally, it was like a boo like I've never experienced in my life. And I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry so badly. It was terrifying. Thankfully, it was the official that was doing that match had agreed with that call. And it's interesting because you could actually challenge calls now, so it's tough. So thankfully the senior official had agreed with that call, and had shared, they had my back, so they agreed, which means that they had my back. But it was really hard. Sometimes you just have to like really hold it in and recognize that you are in the best position to make the best call. And people may not see that, may not understand that, but you still have to make the hard call, even if it's not popular, and then cry later if you need to. Like, just release it later in a safe spot where you know that people are going to be there to encourage you and uplift you. But then also say, like, are you sure? Or like, what made you, did you feel like you were in the best position to make that call? Did you feel like you didn't have any obstacles in front of you, right? To like ask the hard question, but then also say you were the best person to make that call. You made that call. It wasn't popular, and the game goes on. That's kind of the way that the game works.
Within a change project environment, not receiving feedback at all can be disastrous. I remember once presenting a change plan, there's no feedback, and what that really was telling me is nobody cared. They weren't engaged at all, and it would be like your game at McMaster and nobody caring who won. And if that's the case, it's even worse, because you lack the engagement and you're going to lack the ownership and support to be successful.
It's true. Like, to translate this into the workplace as well, like every game, there's a level of difficulty, right? So, when you're making tough decisions in a difficult match, is kind of the same thing when you're making tough decisions in a high sensitive project, or a fast paced project where, there are people that aren't on board, that are struggling, that there may be restructure, like there's just people's lives are being impacted, right? So recognizing that feedback and criticism, although there may be, a negative undertone, it's really important to receive and digest, so that you can actually do what you intended to do, right? And it's pivotal component of our change process to be successful, is to get that feedback and that criticism, and that it's okay if it's negative, because we need that to really formulate and transform our next moves.
Since change on the run, these projects are really fast paced, that constantly trying to meet timelines and move forward. If you were short of time and you did receive criticism, is there like a one thing that you would do that would give you the best results?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I've been thinking about this one for a while, and it's hard for me to wrap into like a one thing, because I feel like there's a couple of steps. But I want to share a quote that I feel kind of encapsulates maybe what I would do, or my thought process. So it's actually from an unknown author, which is not helpful, but it says, "Don't mind criticism. If it's untrue, disregard it. If it's unfair, keep it from irritation. If it's ignorant, smile. And if it's justified, it's not criticism, learn from it." It just helps me kind of filter through the different options when receiving criticism, and just like an appropriate mindset to be in, so that you could either digest it, use it to empower your next move, or when you just need to smile and say thank you, yes and okay. So that would be like my one thing that breaks down the different options in a very quick solution that's just human.
That's great. No, thank you. It's a beautiful quote, and it's a great approach to dealing with it. And the one thing I would do is, as you said, it's the facts. You could be wrong, just like making a call in volleyball. Maybe you missed it. Maybe the criticism is right. And the more you can find out whether it's true or not, the better off everyone will be. So what I tend to do is I'll say, tell me more, and because I want to compare facts. Maybe it is ignorant, and I'll smile, or maybe it's bang on and I've completely missed something. But if I don't inquire, I won't know which way that is. And when I've done that, you get into a conversation. And when you get into a conversation, you move past the opposition, and you get into trading different perspectives, which we know there's so many when change is going on. And just wondering, rounding off our talk today, is there like one kind of thought, you've shared so much, but one kind of thought or a watch out or a recommendation or an insight about responding to criticism that you think the listeners would benefit from?
Personally, for me, I would say that sometimes criticism helps you gain the clarity on where you want to go and who you want to be. And whether that's positive or negative, just mapping that back to your anchor, who you are, who maybe you don't want to be, where you want to go, and maybe where you don't want to go, right? So just recognizing that you're able to digest that information however you feel fit to really empower you and transform your next steps in who you are as a person. So essentially, criticism could be leveraged as a tool to get that clarity that you need to recognize, okay, is this aligned with who I am? And is it not aligned? And how is it going to help me become better? That's really where I would land on receiving and digesting criticism.
Beautiful. Well said. Thanks so much. Roberta, thank you so much for being on the Change on the Run podcast. I've loved our conversation. Really appreciate your perspectives. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Phil. That's awesome. I appreciate it.
Is there any way, if someone wanted to follow up or connect with you, is there any way that you'd recommend?
Yeah, you could follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm always available via email or cell phone, but connect with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'd also like to thank our producer, Charlie Buckley, and thank you for listening. And if you have any questions or comments, please email me at phil@changewithconfidence.com. And for upcoming episodes, please subscribe to the Change on the Run podcast, and please write a review if you've got the time. So until the next time, I wish you all the best as you continue to lead change.